Yep.
Awesome. Hello and welcome to Design Chat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern. On Twitter, I'm at Hoopajube and at DesignChat. Once a week we get together. This is 2010. This is the very first episode of 2010. This is episode number 37 of Design Chat. And we bring together some of the coolest people from design, come together as a community. We break down all the barriers that we deal with in the creative community to come together and talk about anything and everything design. So tonight we're privileged to be talking to Mr. Gong Szeto, whom I met. Oh, let's golf clap. Gong Szeto, yay! Thank you, Gong, for coming.
Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
And yet another member of the Cusp family. I met back in September at Cusp '09 in Chicago. And Cusp is the gift that just keeps on giving, isn't it, Gong?
It was an awesome conference.
It was. And we actually did a live broadcast with you from the convention, and we lost the video. The video pooped out on us, and I couldn't publish it, but at least it went out live that night. So okay, so because what you do is what you do, I'm going to have you introduce yourself so I don't screw it up, because I know I will. So why don't you give us a little bit of back history about who you are and what you do as a designer?
Sure. Well, let's see, do we do it chronologically or backwards? You can
Tarantino it.
Yeah,
start with the end.
I started as an art student, actually, in university, and changed my major midstream to architecture, and so I actually have a degree in architecture. And I know that you studied architecture for a few years yourself.
I did.
And after architecture school, was always kind of a computer geek. Actually minored in computer science at university, and eventually joined my brother in a new design firm in New York called IO360. And he was a graduate of Cooper Union, and he was a design, architecture, and computer graphics major there. And so we, did a lot of, early multimedia and web, internet website work in the mid-90s. Having a design firm in New York is pretty awesome. I mean, any big city, but New York is great. And so I was able to have a lot of clients on Wall Street. And so for a bunch of years, did a lot of work in the financial sector. So I would say that's probably one area that I have a lot of experience in, is doing sort of financial applications for, investment banks and hedge funds. And so, fast forward to, beyond the dot-com bust, realized that I was really interested in technology, systems, the internet, was really excited, with Web 2.0 and social media when that sort of exploded. And around that time, I was designing really high-performance trading systems for equity derivatives in Chicago. And I'm
going to have you repeat that last part again, because I know I had to absorb that a couple times. So say that last part again.
Well, I mean, do you trade stocks online?
I couldn't be more ignorant of the meta universe of financial. All
right, so there's E-Trade and Schwab and Ameritrade and all those guys, the online brokerages, right? What I did was I designed the trading platform for a brand new brokerage called Options House that is specifically in trading options contracts that are based on stocks. Okay, so that's that being said, it's kind of an esoteric instrument for the mainstream investor, and there's lots and lots of data involved, and so I had to be really smart about designing a very sophisticated Ajax-based site to handle lots of transactions and lots of data. So that was really fun, and that I think that as far as high performance based applications on the web, it probably doesn't get much more intensive, sort of like transactions per second, than in the financial space. So that was a big learning experience. But right around that time, I also, was really kind of nourishing my interest in, politics and economics. I actually, took a lot of courses after my degree in business and accounting and finance, just because I'm, interested in that stuff. And, started really asking a lot of questions about how to merge this sort of loose thing called design to those very abstract, domains that, I've been interested in. And really, it's for the past couple of years, I've been really immersed in that area, which is how to, um, uh, make politics and economics like really accessible to, the average person, because we're all in it. Yet I think that not everyone can say that it's been demystified to them. And one thing that I know that design is very good at is sort of making things accessible and simple. And so that's sort of been a personal project that is yielding some actually real projects that are going on for me right now.
So a couple of notes for the people who are here. If this is your first time, we've got an hour long here with Gong, and what we do is during our conversation for the first half an hour, 45 minutes or so, definitely talk to each other in the chat room and ask questions of Gong, because what we do is we harvest those questions at the last 15 minutes or 20 minutes of the show. We submit those back to Gong, giving you credit, of course. I won't take credit for your questions, I promise, unless it's really good, and then I might. And so you guys can actually participate in the show. It's not just a one-way thing. We come together as a group, and you guys can all participate. So do not hesitate to throw those questions up in the chat room, and we will address those at the end of the chat. Okay. So let's back up a little.
One thing I'd like to say, too, I mean, for the audience, you can go to my my website, which is, gongzeto.com, and there's a link in the right sidebar which says something like past work or something. And I just threw a bunch of various images there of stuff I've done in the last couple of years, for those that aren't familiar with my work or this sort of realm of sort of, finance application design. Anyone's welcome to just check that out to kind of give you a little bit of, context.
Totally. And something else I forgot to mention is that we also have the Twitter account DesignChat Links, who is active in the chat room right now. So as we talk about things, we're going to be throwing the URLs up in there so you guys can find them. And if later you're talking to somebody about it, you can go to the Twitter account, and all the links are saved there to go back to. We should also mention that on Twitter, you're Adam Iota, which was already up there in the chat room. So everybody follow Gong on Twitter. Good stuff. So let's back up a little bit, and I've watched your video from the CUSP conference was published on the CUSP website not too long ago, and I've watched it twice and gone in the last 2 days and gone over it again. And like I keep on rewinding spots and like taking notes on what is, and then I got to look up a word and go back and find out what these things are. Because I mean, like I said before, I couldn't be more sort of ignorant of the whole sort of meta economy. But it's once you start grasping the main subjects of what you're talking about, it's very moving. And you start to realize that we're now in an age where so much data is being thrown at us that we need design to organize this data for us and make any sense of it whatsoever. And you showed this great chart that showed like the real economy, which is tangible objects and products and services and that sort of thing, and then the meta economy, which is trading stocks and derivatives and hedge funds and all this kind of stuff. And the amount of money that's spent in the U.S. on the real economy versus the meta economy is crazy, because I wouldn't have guessed it, that it was something like 13 billion in the meta economy, and it was like 4 billion or something like that in the real economy. Well, and it was this great divide.
It's 14 billion for the U.S. GDP and about 105 billion for all the sort of stocks and derivatives and that sort of thing. So it's orders of magnitude more.
And even the word billion,
yeah.
you know, it seems almost cartoonish. You know, gazillion, like it just seems so intangible, silly at some point to even think about. It's hard to think about a million sometimes, you know, and what that looks like, and because it's such an intangible sort of idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it even gets crazy when, you know, I think, you know, we're designers. We you know, typically work for agencies. We have clients. And if, you know, I don't know the statistics, but if you were to add up all the designers and all the design firms and all the clients, you know, all together and aggregated all the revenues and output, you know, of all the clients, I think that, and it's probably safe to assume that designers don't work for every company in the United States. It's probably, you know, some very, you know, tiny fraction, you know, that quote unquote gets design. You know, that number alone is probably pretty big. I mean, it's really, it's kind of impossible to get your head around, but you know, the data is out there, so it's knowable.
And something that you talk a little bit is also real-time data visualization. You've got a project that you mentioned at Cospin and on your website, yourowndemocracy.org, which would be a site that could, in real time, get the sentiment of all, you know, voters and that sort of thing to see how we feel about multiple different issues. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, in this democracy, we have the opportunity to elect our representation. It's called a representative democracy. So that ranges from the president, which hopefully, you know, we all voted in the recent election, but there's also everyone in Congress. And if you go down to the state level, that's, you know, governor, lieutenant governors, various positions in the cabinet, and down to local level to the mayor and that sort of thing. So it's actually, if you think about it, there are a lot of times that we're able to vote. And the president of the United States, I mean, that election is every 4 years, and the Senate has a different timetable in the Congress, and they're all sort of, you know, staggered, and it's really hard to keep track of. But essentially what we're doing there is we're voting for people. We're people as symbols or as edifices that we, you know, kind of pour our hopes and our aspirations into. Like, please, you know, vote for things that are in my best interest. But the reality is our society is really complex, and it's really it is much more complex than just, you know, Democrats versus Republicans, and so. And then no one really, everyone's busy. You know, no one has the time to keep track of every single candidate that's going on in every election that's going on. So that's one example of just an immense amount of data and information that you have to deal with to make a decision on which way to go, right? And that's just people. And so what my project is doing, Your Own Democracy, I actually didn't feel completely satisfied with just the every 4-year interval for these things, because a lot of really bad things can happen between election and when they're out of office. You know, we can name the last presidential administration, which was 2 terms, and you know, some good things happen, and largely really terrible things happen. And you know, other than sort of protesting and you know, ranting on various, you know, boards or, you know, townhall.com or huffpost.com and, you know, places like that, it's a random and kind of fragmented environment. And there's also a tendency for elected leadership to sort of separate themselves from the electorate. And so I said, well, what can design do? What can technology do? What can be done to sort of close that gap so that there is a way to measure how we're feeling about issues and like legislation and bills, which are things that are about to become laws. That's what, you know, Congress does. And, you know, oftentimes when there's a big issue like in healthcare, for example, you hear a lot of cries out to, you know, call your representative, you know, and usually when that happens, it's handled by some interest group, and they're really into these sort of spam, you know, these fax bombs or these email bombs. And I've done, you know, quite a few interviews this year with staffers in those offices, and, you know, they're completely overwhelmed. They can't keep track of who's saying what. Like, you know, you got this, you know, you come into work in the morning, there's like this, you know, gigantic stack of, you know, faxes, you know, some saying, you know, vote for this, some saying vote against it. But, you know, and so time is against them. And it becomes a really manually and labor intensive process. And if you sort of look at it, it's like awfully kind of, primitive, which is really, we live in, we have the most advanced, technological society at all, yet the way that they're processing this stuff. And we're talking about, people in district, my district, probably only has about, 90,000 people, but you could take some districts in California that has like 1 million people. I mean, how do these offices handle that stuff? And so obviously it's a good technology and information processing problem. And so once you have all that raw data, how do you present it so that becomes, meaningful so you see, oh, Ryan sort of say, well, I'm really for this, and you can sort of scan, well, the rest of my district is tending against it. I feel really passionate about it, so what can I do to try to influence them to think, my way? And, chat boards are, one way, discussion forums are another way. There are a lot of rich tool sets that we have today that we didn't have like 10 years ago. And in some ways, I would even argue that it's still fairly protean right now. I mean, the fact that we're doing this, this design chat this way is radical and cool. If you think about, your life and the state of technology just, 5 or 7 years ago, I mean, just, you remember See You, See Me? I mean, that was kind of, pretty
two
cool.
years ago even, even, like, I mean, this chat, they've been building these cameras into the computers now for 2 or 3 years, and there were external cameras that you can buy 7 years ago, but nobody really has been taking advantage of them because there's this whole learning curve of and sort of comfort curve of being in front of someone again. I bring up this example all the time that I think right now we're going through a new wave of social etiquette and learning how to be social again, because we're finally face to face and we were communicating more freely and more openly than during this whole, I want to call it a dark age of having television in our homes and not even knowing the names of our neighbors. But I think we are at this really important juncture right now where it's funny to see businesses and communication that still depends upon faxing when we have all of these brilliant ways to connect. And it's frustrating at some level that it's not happening faster, because of how fast the technology is coming and that people aren't adopting it fast enough and changing and learning new ways to communicate. And especially on the government level where it's, just like you mentioned, it's really sort of, I forget the word that you were using, but they're using prehistoric means of communication. And it's just not, it's not going to work good. It's not going to do any good for anybody because it's not fast enough.
Well, here's the good news. I agree with everything that you said, but here's the good news. I mean, I think we are in a generation that does get the technology. We also get the user experience part of it. That it's got to be robust. It's got to be delightful. It's got to work, and it's it has to be meaningful. Technology on its own is sort of raw and neutral. I think what design does, it gives it life and helps whatever objective or purpose it has sort of go from here to here. And I think that's an ongoing continuum. But as far as the government primitivity stuff, I think Obama has done a lot to make that much more popular. I need to give props to the Sunlight Foundation, which is all about technology and government and transparency and really lobbying for government to unload their and reveal their data sets, which they're just starting to do in the last few months at data.gov. But that's just the first step. And one thing that I do remember talking with you about at CUSP is just because they put online 100,000 data sets from 500 different federal agencies, there needs to be converted into something meaningful, right? And I think a lot of the data visualization techniques, or even it makes it sound like it's like some hyper sophisticated thing, but it isn't really. It's like, well, you've got a bunch of tables, so let's just make an easy to understand chart that looks good, that is digestible to your average person, to make this point that the United States has a low mortality rate, yet we're paying the highest healthcare rates in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that is a very simple thing, and that's somebody that really sort of needs to, like, for example, a designer can sort of parse that information and present it in a way that it becomes meaningful. So, like I said, I mean,
There's a
it's
part of me that
changed.
has a lot of fear about this whole subject, that, how important data can be and the way that data is shown, and who controls that and how is it controlled, and when it gets released, how much do we trust that source, and this whole idea of finally being at a point where it looks like governments might start to be a little bit more open, and it's when I talk to people about this subject, there's so much skepticism about how much we trust the information that's coming out about what the government is actually doing, and understanding where our tax dollars are going and what they're paying for. And it's easy to get upset about this very quickly, because it's like, why are we giving all this money if we don't know how it's being used or why it's being used, or even agree with the reasons that they're using the money for,
Right. Well, I think you're right to be skeptical or suspicious. I think actually everyone should. Government is. I mean, most of my talk at CUS was really all about the relationship of government to society and
Mm-hmm.
economy,
Mm-hmm.
and that's not necessarily to say that I'm Mr. Pro-government. I mean, it's sort of a meaningless statement. I'm into government that makes good decisions, but government is fully capable of making really bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really the electorate, it's the media, it's mainstream media, independent journalism, watchdog groups, etc. We're allowed to prosper and exist in this country. I mean, it's uh, virtually impossible to have that thrive in autocracies like China, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So the good news is there are lots of groups that are working on this problem, and I think that the more examples, for example, just seeing this Mashable chat window and that it's actually working the way it should, helps an individual who might be skeptical at the beginning, who may have gotten burned by something crashing their computer a few months ago.
Yeah.
That there are good people behind this stuff with good intentions, and confidence and trust can be built over time with that.
Right. Yeah, and trust is such an important part about it, because for so long we've had these ideas in our head that you can't trust all the information that's out there. Even the information that's coming from our news sources, people are skeptical about. And I think this is a new age, an exciting new time, in which now that everyone and anyone can have a voice and publish and broadcast and talk to anyone on the web, that we're going to see a period where leaders in any type of subject are going to rise from the internet, get popularity on the internet, and then come to power because of that popularity and that trust that they build up over time.
Yes, you're exactly right. I think, let's see, what you were just talking before, there's a social sciences, specifically economic, term called rational ignorance. And that term describes, well, how can my one vote make a difference, when millions of people are voting? It's a sort of sense that statistically speaking, the odds of me mattering at all are nil. So I'm going to just sort of rationally check out because I don't matter, and it's all going to, work out or play out, its way whether I'm involved or not. Mm-hmm. Well, the reality is, and there's a lot of criticism about the American electorate that they're ignorant and ill-informed. And I will never make the claim that I know everything. I mean, at the last local election that I went to, I only knew like 3 names on the ballot. Mm-hmm. And there were, we were going to, elect new justices for the Supreme Court. Had no idea. I mean, do I leave it blank? Do I just sort of throw a dart? I mean, so you get into sort of this statistical nightmare situation where maybe they're right. Maybe it's completely random, and whoever's like the candidate that has the friendliest face or the right sort of buzzwords is really going to get the majority vote. Now, in your heart and my heart, you're thinking, well, that's whack and it shouldn't be that way. Well, in reality, statistically, in terms of the voting sciences, what they've sort of, figured out is that it is mostly random. 99% of electorate, it actually doesn't even matter if 99% of the electorate is smart and informed, because most elections are close. They're going to be around like 49% to 51%, that sort of thing. But what swings it is this narrow band of the informed person. And that's why there's so much focus in swing states and wooing the independent voter. That's why Obama, for example, never even stumped in Texas, because he had no chance, right? So he invested in, states like Ohio. So it becomes statistically strategic and things like that. But I think that the reality is it is a narrow band of very, very informed people that actually can swing elections one way or the other. And so that being said, my hope and dream is actually to build a platform where it's not just about electing people, but about actually building statistical data set around the way we're feeling about various issues like healthcare, the war in Afghanistan, et cetera, that the system has registered your, mouse click, I support this. And then maybe over time, the system also allows you to change your mind. Oh, well, new information. Well, I was for the Iraq war, and now I think it's whack, so I want to change my mind.
Right.
Our current voting system doesn't allow you to change your mind. It's like, one man, one vote, that's it, you're done. So I'm kind of bending the rules a little bit, but it's not focused on the election of individuals. It's really about issues and having civil debates with one another to sort of influence point of view and sort of build support around stuff. And I think the simple premise is that if you use this enough and you're in there with your friends, and frankly, if you start making friends on the system, or even better yet, making friends on the other side of your political position, that you suddenly get pulled into this realm of what you and I and people in our tribe are used to doing every day, which is problem solving, which is here are these things that are troubling, our country. So how can we, work together? You can call it crowdsource or wisdom of crowds or whatever. Come up with certain recommendations that is backed up by data. It's like, here's this idea to make, my city better, and we know that my city has 80,000 people, and 55,000 people think this is a good idea. I think that becomes much more powerful than someone in a closed room saying, well, I kind of think that this would be a good idea. Right. And I'm also, very frustrated at how strong the political lobby is, in our political system. And I think that there has to be a way to aggregate and to give strength and voice to, people in, our democracy, and move it from an ideological, war zone into more of a problem-solving whiteboard space. That's really where I think a lot of these sort of shared technologies and social technologies can take us. I mean, that's the dice that I'm willing to roll.
And so when do those dice roll? Is this, something that's going to come to, is this idea going to show up on the web in the next 6 months, the next 8 months? Like, how close are we to seeing something like that? Yours or others?
Well, I think there are a lot of, if you look at a lot of stuff that the Sunlight Foundation has sponsored, like Apps for America, and a lot of things that they have given grants to in the last few years, opencongress.org is one of my favorite ones. There's a lot of bits and pieces of things out there, and it's all open source, and they're all being done by volunteers, and no one is getting paid any serious money to do any of this. I mean, it is beautiful in any example where volunteerism is applied, and that's really the spirit of all of that work. The stuff that I'm doing, the stuff that's on my website is about a year old. I spent the last 4 months redesigning the entire thing, and I'm about to go out to California to have talks with my partner out there about next steps to actually start building it. It'll probably take about 3 or 4 months to build the first phase. So I think sometime in late spring we'll have something that people can start using. But it's I'm one of those people that you have to restrain. Like it's too easy for me to in Photoshop put down a million crazy ideas and say, look, this is amazing, and then have, a really hot, architect look at it and say, well, it'll only take us 18 years to do it, so you got to pare it back.
Right.
So I don't know. I think 2010, for my project, and I stay in touch with a lot of people that are working in this space, and I think it's a really protean phase right now. It's a time for experimentation, to just sort of get, widgets and apps and little various things out there, and to sort of popularize the fact that there are these really great things that in tools and toys even that you can use, that are really a part of the spirit of strengthening, which is essentially about strengthening our democracy, and person-to-person communication and group-to-group collaboration. Again, this whole, nothing chaps my butt more than the ideological divide that exists in this country, and how resistant most people are to change or to new ideas. And then you have, this whole tribe of people called designers, which, are typically fairly fearless. And you get a creative brief from a client you've never heard of in an industry that you have, nothing about, and you've got 6 weeks to turn something around. So you dive in, you figure it out, you do your research, you come up with a bunch of comps or prototypes, and you put it up there, and you're going to be wrong more than you're right. But like, that's what we do.
But as a designer, you have to be sort of an early adopter, and you have to be open to the new ideas, because each client is going to be different. Each scenario is going to be different. And if you really want to work, you want to be able to work in multiple different types of industries, right? And not just get bogged down to the same exact thing and churn. Well, some people that's comfortable, and that's fine for them. But I think it's much more exciting to be able to spread the wealth everywhere and take all different types of projects, because your brain is a muscle, and the more you work it out, the more different types of problems you can solve and apply them, in different ways to your other projects. And so in the sort of spirit of now is a time for technological experimentation, where do you experiment? What's your daily tech life like? What are the websites you have to go to every day? What are the gadgets you have to touch and are obsessed with?
Well, that's a good question. I have a 30-inch cinema display which goes edge to edge with TweetDeck, and that is probably my number one tool.
Love TweetDeck.
Okay. I also use, that's my main monitor.
I got to interrupt you for a second. I started to do a Photoshop experiment yesterday with a screen capture of my 20-inch TweetDeck layout, and I was laying over that images from The Matrix, where he's looking at all the data that's flying through, and then all of a sudden all those digits turn into people, and then he sort of understands what they are and how to move in the Matrix. That's what I feel like when I'm looking at my Twitter deck. There's so much that comes, and I'm trying to participate in this and do my job at the same time, which my boss hates, absolutely hates. And it's difficult right now, but I'm getting better at it.
Well, it's definitely the number one productivity killer that I can name. So I have that on
Sorry, Stan, if you're watching right now.
My main display on my right, I've got a 24-inch in portrait, which is what I browse with, so that I can just get much longer pages. And I've got probably close to 800 RSS feeds that I'm trying to keep up with. I've got a fire hose coming at me like 24/7, and I probably can only pick up like 5% of it, right? But here's the thing, it's not that I'm an addict. I am an addict, but I try to get my work done as well too. But this is what I love about. I think Twitter has made me smarter. I've been using Twitter for about 1.5 years. Before Twitter, I'm a heavy Facebook user too, for slightly different reasons. But I used to read a lot, online, and that that helps me, stay informed and everything. But there's something about the serendipity and the fire hose, and especially with people that you like and trust. So this whole follow model of Twitter, I think, is awesome. That suddenly that is also a two-way channel. That's part of this fire hose, and it's probably the most exciting technology that I have today. I mean, is it a design technology? Yes and no. Yes, in that for the things that I'm interested in doing, I have to study the dynamics of information digestion,
Yes.
and how conversation and dialogue are constructed and tracked and archived, and that sort of thing. So that a lot of that stuff factors in. I mean, I actually haven't really invented a ton of new stuff. And the stuff I'm doing, I'm really sort of piecing together the best of today's technologies and maybe tweaking them in a way that that focuses them in ways that where Twitter is more generic, mine is more focused to political dialogue, for example.
And a lot of times those are ideas that are old to us but new to other groups of people.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And that's why, I mean, I use Facebook too. I mean, I cross-post, or I cross-update, not everything from Twitter, but a lot of things from Twitter, onto Facebook. The threading on Facebook, I think, is still superior. I don't think Twitter even pretends to be, a threading medium. But like I just posted something on Facebook last night, and I had like 26, 27 responses. And I don't know about you. I mean, you're probably much more popular guy than I am.
No, it's not bad.
It's pretty good. I just basically I asked, like, because I was kind of in a funk, and I'm like, what sports movies do y'all watch to get you out of a funk? And all of a sudden, like, I got all these responses, and a ton of movies that I've never even seen before. So
yeah.
But that's the beauty of it, because otherwise, if I didn't have it, I'd be sitting there in a funk.
Right.
And
it's immediate gratification a lot of times too.
Yes, and there's no reason why, if we have all of these channels, that we can't have this, the real-time dimension to it. And it's not. And I think that we're getting to a place where we process information a lot of different ways. It can be face-to-face. It can be over email. It can be completely text-based. It can be.
How do you feel about mobile?
How do I feel about mobile?
Yeah.
Mobile is good.
That's a great feeling.
I don't know if this is true, but they say that the new Apple tablet is going to have a camera in it.
Really?
A video camera.
Interesting.
And I'm thinking that's gonna be kind of fun to play with.
That's going to shake things up a bit.
Yeah.
So if it's got that and the tactile feedback, have you heard about that one?
I didn't understand what that was.
There's a patent that they registered where there would be bumps underneath the screen that would raise up when you needed them. So a lot of people have problems with the iPhone it's a flat piece of glass, and then you type on it, you can't feel where the buttons are. So the idea in the patent, at least, is that when you want to type, these bumps raise up. And maybe it's just two. Maybe it's just on the F and the J, so that you know where your fingers are and they don't slide from that point, and you can look away while you type or understand it tactically better.
Right.
Which would be interesting, because then that means that the surface isn't a hard piece of glass. It needs to have a little bit of flex to it.
Right. Well, I don't know what you're into, but, nubbed condoms generally are more popular, are they not?
For her pleasure, and maybe now it's for everyone's pleasure.
Well, I can't wait to see. I mean, no, it's a terrifically exciting time in technology, and especially Apple products. I mean, it's not specifically, solely Apple, but it's they have a really strong design ethic, as you know.
There's so many tablets that I think are coming out because of the rumors.
Oh, sure. I read one about a Freescale did a spec for a $200 tablet that was going to run Linux or whatever. I mean, I think if the genre sticks, we have years and years of iterations to look forward to.
Yeah.
And to go broke on.
So if Apple released a tablet tomorrow and it was $700, and you had to pay an additional connectivity fee to Verizon in addition to your phone plan and your home web service, is that something you personally could just jump into?
I could if I liked the platform enough.
Yeah.
I actually am not. I would actually call myself an early adopter. But I'm not a late adopter. I'd like to hang out and watch my super geek friends work figure it out and give me that feedback. I think it is. I think it will be expensive, and but I mean, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, if it's really cool. I mean, I've been sort of salivating about getting the Kindle DX for most of this year.
Yeah.
But I've held off because I haven't bumped into someone that had one, because I want to like play around with it
Sure.
and make that decision. But I think, knowing what Apple is capable of, I mean, I can't name the last bomb that they've had. It's when was the last bomb? I mean, everything's been pretty
Apple
good for a while.
TV. Apple TV came
Uh-uh.
out. The MacBook Air.
Apple TV right there.
You got one sitting there?
I love it. Absolutely love it.
I think it does great for the people who were willing to adopt it. But it's, when it came out, I was so excited. I was like, oh man, everyone's going to have one of these, and the adoption never came.
So do you think they'll kill it?
I think they're going to morph it. I think because there's so many different ways of creating these types of products and getting the web information to your TV, I don't understand why they haven't done a cinema display that is a computer yet. It's a TV that hangs on your wall, but it's got wireless that already connects to your wireless system in your house, and you can surf
Right.
and have a new sort of interface there.
Right.
Why it hasn't happened yet, I have no idea.
Well,
Boxy is going to come in and kill it.
Yeah, the Boxy stuff looks pretty great. I'm excited about playing around with that. But I think the new 27-inch, is kind of sort of the quasi, thing you can hang on the wall. Yeah.
But the price, man, they kill you on their prices for that. I mean, it's definitely the BMW of computers, and they're going to do fine. They're going to make their money. They're happy. They've got plenty of money in the bank. But the Apple nerd inside me wants it to blow up and have everybody experience this, because it's such a better experience, a user experience, than anything else that's out there right now. Surfing on my DirecTV is a nightmare. I get frustrated every time I pick up that stupid remote.
Yeah, no, it's bad. I think there was a comment here that some new TVs will have built-in Skype, and I read about that the other day, and I think that's going to be pretty exciting. Yeah. No, but the good news is too. I mean, Apple innovates really quickly. They can release stuff on a fairly quick timetable. So, I typically buy stuff every 2 or 3 generations. I don't get, I don't leg up, every single time they release something. But, I think it's all good. I think, the U.S. is in sort of shaky state. Right now the economy is sort of shaky politically. It's shaky. I think there has been a lot of liquidity drained from, venture, but there's still, strong companies, and there's still room for startups, and, we just may not see the rate that we saw before, but I think the spirit is there. So yeah, no, there's a lot to look forward to.
So let's project and then predict sort of for 2010 in the role of a designer. Let's say 2010 economy bombs again, and people start letting designers go, and designers need to find ways to get work and to keep engaged. What would you say is good advice for designers in that situation?
Well, that's a great question. I think that in the last, year and a half or so, there's, around this big cloud of the meme of innovation and design thinking, and suddenly design has kind of discovered its potential power in making social impact. I think that realm is still really protean, and I think that one of the arguments that I made at CUSP was that the domain that design is typically comfortable in is in the domain of private markets, in capitalism, in broad products and services and goods and stuff. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, we need a prosperous economy, and that's what economies are based on. But there's also a lot of things that are outside the purview of the private realm where design can begin to have an impact. Politics is the area that I have chosen to really examine right now, and I'm not the only one. I was just in Aspen a few months ago, for the Winter House and AIGA summit, where I was assigned to the group with the Mayo Clinic, where we're thinking about how to get modern medicine into poor and rural areas. Like, I have not ever thought about that problem. And in 4 intense days, now I know more than I ever imagined I would know about that domain. But there are a bunch of other groups dealt with obesity, with aging population, with food systems, et cetera. And this is probably the most inspiring stuff that I've seen, is seeing so much of the field start to move, and well, not to move necessarily, but at least to open their eyes and to start really caring about it. I mean, because every wave, always has a sort of leading edge, and then people sort of fall into it as opportunities grow. And I think that's essentially what is happening. So, design is relevant in every corner of the universe. I mean, there's, and that's really becoming obvious. And that's what I would probably encourage, because, like, if you're laid off and you're a designer, you've gotten laid off from the private sector, most likely.
Yeah.
And so it will mean that the private sector is not ready to hire you back today. So there are other sectors to look at and to cut your teeth. And especially right now, especially with the environmental movement really putting a lot of pressure on corporations to make products, more sustainable. I mean, that meme is a very strong right now, where, designers have had to really, bone up on, all the latest, science and issues around sustainability and design. And so anytime we have a discipline where the information, continues to be fresh, which is based on, need and relevance and stuff that's going on in the world, that just means that, design continues to thrive. It will not cease to sort of plateau and stagnate. But you have to make yourself do it, otherwise, and I would like to see every designer be a leader in some way.
So action, you're saying, is important, taking action.
Absolutely, and be bold, get new ideas out there, because, like I said, it's a fairly protean time. I mean, there are no laws written, nothing is written in concrete. No one is absolutely right. I mean, I think everyone all the really brilliant people that I was working with in Aspen were certainly not born, as social innovators, and they certainly were not, only recently credentialed as such, and everyone's like fairly young, it's very exciting. And so I'm turning 43 this year, so I actually look at myself as quite literally mid-career. So, I was professional designer since I was 21. So I've been, hacking at this for a while, but at some point I made a decision, probably around when I turned 40, that I'm actually in the second half of my career. And what does that mean? And that to me means that I've got to figure out a way to give back. Before I'm like working for the man, and
right.
I'm, bringing home a paycheck, and I'm, every now and then I, win an award or get some recognition, but then that was sort of it, and all my friends were designers, and that was sort of it. And I had no complaints about that, but I also knew that there was a big, big world out there, right?
Right.
And I remember when my father was 43, he seemed like such a wise, accomplished man. And, I always admired, all of his accomplishments. And I never really, maybe, it's just some insecurities that I have about myself, but I just really felt like I can't just coast in the second half. I've got to go in overdrive. I've got to take some real risks. I mean, it goes beyond just you only live once, but
right. Yeah.
I've got these tools. I've got this, these skills, and there's a lot of need. I think, there is a whole class of design objects and things that I find terribly boring, which are like, you go to the supermarket and you go, I went the other day, actually, I had to buy a new toothbrush, and there's freaking like 125 toothbrushes there, and there are probably 125 different designers working on another iteration of toothbrush.
Right.
And I'm like,
yeah.
there really is no point anymore. I mean, we're done. We're done there. Okay.
We've got it covered.
All right. So far be it for me to dictate what that thing is. I mean, I would just say, I would say to you, like what, obviously what you're doing has such a sharing impulse. It has such a connecting impulse. It
And I
has
really
such,
hope that's where the design world is going to go, because we do have all these competitive barriers and corporate barriers put up in our working world, that I hope that things like this and other opportunities on the internet open that wide open, so that anybody can talk to anybody and feel comfortable with it. Of course, not doing anything illegal and sharing company secrets and all that sort of thing, but getting over the fear of not connecting. And that's one of the surprises I've had with doing this is, I'm a designer. I've never had any sort of broadcast experience or writing experience. I just decided it was time to do something. I found the tools, and I started writing emails to people that I thought were interesting in design, right? And one after another, I kept on getting, yes, yeah, I'll come talk to you. I'll come talk to the group. And it keeps on like growing. And it's so awesome that it's happening like this, and that I met a ton of cool people at CUSP, and I've been slowly bringing them one by one to here and enjoying that, and that's been awesome. But yeah, it's a really exciting time, and so let's involve the group. We've got another 10 or 15 minutes or so. I've got some questions here that have been thrown out, and keep on throwing those questions up there, because if I roll through these really quick, I'm gonna have nothing to ask. So keep on putting questions. No, I will have something to ask, but I don't want to.
well,
I want you guys.
yeah, I'll shout out Jonathan Bennell, who's based in Toronto, writes, what does Gong think of Roger Martin's thoughts on that design thinking will be the next competitive advantage?
Go ahead.
And I think it's a great question. I think, I don't want to assume that everyone in the audience knows what Jonathan is referring to, but Roger Martin is the dean at the Rotman School of Business in Canada. And that is a business school, an MBA program that has really embraced design thinking as an integral part of that curriculum, and that it is design thinking and design approaches and the creative process, et cetera. I mean, there's so many different ways to describe it, is an antidote to pure analytical reasoning, which, is the basis for a lot of other MBA programs. So that's an interesting program. So, I mean, to answer that question, I think I'm all for it. I think it's fine. I think that, like, time will tell. I mean, I have actually not, I've seen Roger Martin speak. I have not actually seen a case study of a graduate from Rotman that has actually applied this stuff in the real world to say, well, eureka, this actually works. So,
Right.
But I also think that they haven't been at it for very long. Like I said, a lot of things are sort of protean. I think we need to, suspend our disbelief and just see what happens. However, on the other side of that, I've actually always liked the idea that more analytical thinking should go into design education. Sort of the opposite tack. I haven't been very loud about this because I something of a feeling in my gut that it would go nowhere. But I am kind of an example of someone who was traditionally trained in design, specifically architecture, but because of an interest or curiosity in more analytical domains, is able to be conversant with people who have PhDs, in these areas, and I'll never pretend to have a PhD, but it's just sort of more stuff, more material for my brain and heart to kind of process, and that's I would like to the stuff that I'm working on right now to succeed, not only, well, mostly because I think it'll be good for society in general, but to be a model for the design profession, that you can kind of go left of center, even just go really fringe, pick a corner of the universe that no one's really talking about, and just flesh that out for people and bring it back in and sort of say, well, I mean, I'm very impressed by this whole format. I mean, you could say that the design chat, with a couple of windows and a chat window, and we'll talk for an hour. Well, yeah, that sounds good. But until you're actually in the experience, you don't know how good it is, right? And so you're doing it. You're just doing it. You just decide to do it, right?
Just jumped into it and see what works.
It's going to growing. And so like that's what I'd like to see design culture morph into, which
Yeah.
is you don't wait around for the creative brief. You write the
Exactly.
creative brief. You write
Yeah.
it, okay? And it's easy for me to say because it's something that I only started doing when I turned 40. You know, I would love to see, you know, designers in their 20s start, you know, going on a limb and doing it. And it's okay to be wrong.
And
You know,
there are groups out there who are starting this sort of thing, like the master's program at Rhode Island School of Design is all based on, you know, designer as creator, as content creator. And I think now that we all have the ability to publish on our own, we don't have to pay for, you know, printing to get something out there. We can just publish it on the internet and boom, anyone in the world can see it. I think that, you know, this is going to happen. I think it's going to be a slow adoption. I think we're going to get there, but I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Who knows, 40 years from now, there's no way we're going to be interacting the same way we are today. It's going to be new evolution, you know, new ways of sharing information, and hopefully we'll have a better educated public on design and how it can help so many areas that it's not yet.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's keep on cruising here. I've got 4 or 5 questions I want to throw out. This first one's from Kalimux. Asks, can you talk about good versus bad design in voting systems? And I mean more than just machines themselves.
Well, I'll approach it this way where if it's not voting machines, then maybe you're talking about the various types of voting philosophies. Right now, the simplest is just sort of majority, you know, voting systems where the person that gets the most votes, you know, wins. But there are, I don't know, I lost count. There's probably like 4 or 5, you know, sort of experimental ones, you know, where the one that I like the most, I forget the name of it, but you're basically, when you go in to vote, you vote your ranking order of all the various
Order of importance.
Order of importance, and so they aggregate that information, and they actually found that, and they, you know, they did a lot of studies that the outcome, you know, tend to be different than the sort of brute force majority win. You know, a lot of these things, I don't know. I mean, I'm still sort of a student, you know, of them, and I don't think that there's anything wrong with, you know, the simple system that we have. But, you know, it would just be nice that a lot of these more experimental approaches, you know, are made it more in the mainstream.
Second question comes from, let me just switch to it real quick, Michelle Pruitt. As part of this type of voting system, would it present people with relevant information to make their decision, or just platform to make their decision? So I think she's referring to your project that you have going on the side there. Oh,
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
As part of this type of voting system, I think the real-time data visualization of voter sentiment, would it present people with relevant information to make their decision, or just a platform to make the decision?
Oh, that's a great question. That's actually the big design change that happened this year, which in the version on my site, there wasn't that much about the various sources that influence you. It sort of presumed that you logged on the website and you already knew what you were going to do, which is really not the way people make decisions. And the way people make decisions also changes over time. Mm-hmm. And the strength of influence, whether it's from a friend or from a news article or from a tweet or whatever, it's a very heterogeneous mix. And so the new version emphasizes more the various influence sources that will help you, you know, make a decision. But what hasn't changed is the fact that you can also change your mind. You can change your mind 100 times, but you know there will be sort of an end, you know, between something that actually comes to vote. But it would be sort of it would be also interesting to see how individuals process information that causes them to change their mind, and to be able to locate, well, what sources influenced, you know, that change, you know, back on Monday versus on Thursday. That is much more reflective of the reality of how we tend to think about things.
So again, from Michelle Pruitt asks, What about the people who don't have access to this type of technology, computers, internet, and gadgets?
That's a problem. Yes, everything that I'm doing presumes access to the internet. So I would say there's no easy answer to that. If you know someone, if you're a user of the system and you've got a computer in your home, and you know someone, maybe they're elderly or they're infirm or they're not computer literate or they're scared of it, yet you feel that they need to get involved and do something and to sign up and to register their opinion on something, bring them in your house, let them drive it and make it be a collaborative, social event in and of itself. Certainly, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to teach people to do it. The scale.
So we can tell everybody to just come on over to Gong's house.
Yeah, pretty
much. Come on over. He'll show you how the internet's work.
But here's the thing. I mean, it's going to require. It really will require people to kind of give it up to this because the scale that we're talking about is like hundreds of millions of people. Yeah. It's not a few thousand. I mean, we live in a very large country. I mean, with a lot of people in it.
Next question is from Big Sir 22. Would love to see designers intersect with I'm going to screw this up so bad, neurologists in the future. Thoughts on that? Designers and neurologists. Forget it.
Can I? Well, yeah. I mean, sure. Why not? I do want to. It makes me think of a lecture that I went to recently at the Santa Fe Institute. It was given by a political scientist from the University of San Diego, who's really into neurological imaging. And so he would take pictures of people's brains, of people who are not into politics, people who are rabid about politics. And then he compared brain images to people that are working on really hard math problems if they're not good at math, and people that are working on really hard math problems that are good at math. And the same for art, like making art. And what he found that there's a region of the brain that just lights up, which is the same region that lit up of brain scans of people that were at gym, that they were playing sports, that really? it was just like they were happy, they had flow, they were having fun, and the region of the brain that lit up when they're having a hard time, when they're frustrated, they didn't understand something, they felt self-conscious or embarrassed, was a completely different region of the brain. And I thought that was mind-blowing because you can't assume that everyone has yeah, right, that's exactly right. You can't assume that everyone has the same cognitive threshold, the same cognitive processes. You know, and especially, in the domain of politics, I can't assume that everyone, gives the same amount of shit that I do, or thinks about an issue the same way that I do, or is feeling fluid in gymnastic about that issue. Maybe the issue they are, they have opposition to something, but they're also incredibly embarrassed about it. Like there's a story there, right? And I think in reality, because our society is very complex, I think that's probably more the norm than the exception. But I love that question because that's the next 50 years of scientific discovery, like the stuff that we're going to learn about ourselves with neurosciences. I think can't wait.
On sort of the same subject, Love Live Music asks, I may have missed this, but whose design work do you turn to for inspiration, and what other industries have you not worked in that you turn to for inspiration?
Well, I like all the same designers you do.
You must follow my Twitter account.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, I'm into this, this sort of uncharted, territory, quote unquote, but I'm still, dyed in the wool design enthusiast. I was deeply saddened, when ID Magazine, folded a week ago. Yeah. Actually, I had dinner with Chi Perlman the other night, who was
really?
The editor in the 90s. She was in town. Her parents live here in town. And it's just really nice to be, connected to everything and every little corner that design is in. I'm always nourished by that. Mm-hmm. But right now, I think specifically for the domain that I'm focusing on, which is, politics and economics. I read a whole lot of, policy and law and
Covering up your
economics
microphone.
Sorry. A lot of, very sciencey, textbooky stuff. A lot of it's hard to read, and dry and slow going, but I have to do it. I have to do it.
Chuck Stenick wants to know, so is the transparency website, recovery.gov, worth its $18 million price tag?
18, I thought it was 8. I mean, even 8 was ridiculous. It seems high, doesn't it? I mean, I know a lot of folks, developing very complex, transaction-rich sites, and I pinged them as soon as I heard that, and everyone came back to me and said, we haven't seen that kind of, billing, since 2000, so you got to wonder, like,
right.
What's going on there. But I don't have any, particular insight into that. But no, it seems kind of outrageous to me.
It brings up an interesting subject about charging for your work and understanding the value of your work and what you're providing to your clients. And now crossing that with how is that, how is our taxpayer money being spent, and who's doing that design work, who's doing that web work, and what are their talents worth? There's this real sort of intangible thing with design, of quality of design. You get what you pay for, sort of thing. Like we were talking about logos a few weeks ago, and how like a nice stock photo, you can give them some money and you'll get sort of a generic logo for your company. And you pay $20 and you get, but then you've got like a Citibank who will pay millions and millions and millions of dollars for the same product. It's a logo, and you sort of get what you pay for in that situation.
Yeah, I got nothing to add there. It's kind of a mystery. I think it's at the end of the day, the market the market decides what it can bear, in terms of price, and certain entities or institutions can bear, higher prices than others. I think that, especially, with the Citigroup example, where it's an identity, it's for, a major corporation that became, kind of a nightmare of amalgamation. You got to wonder how much of that was just sort of pure, ego, because, that, 7- and 8-figure fees for that sort of thing may sound like a lot to us, but, I used to work in that world, and that's not a lot of money to them. So, or maybe they felt that, their logo needed to cost, $10 million more than Goldman Sachs's logo, and that made it better. Who knows?
Yeah, the idea of scale, we were touching on that earlier, where the idea of $1 million is sort of sometimes hard to grasp. But if you talk to people who work in that scale, $1 million isn't a whole lot of money in the big business sort of world, the Fortune 500 sort of world, and it can be spent very quickly. And if you're a freelance designer who is designing websites for mom and pop shops in town, and that's your gig and that's how you make your living, it's to understand how the other side of that world works is, it's got to be difficult to grasp at all.
Well, did you ever see the leaked Arnell deck with the Pepsi?
I have it. I have the PDF.
Well, that's why things are so expensive, because you gotta have a lot of slides that talk about kind of cosmic BS. So that costs money. So
I love showing that to people, and I show it to as many different types of people as I can, just to see what kind of reaction comes out of them. And
me too. Yeah. I've shown it to very, very smart people who are actually in neither design or the corporate world. I mean, these are academics. These are people that are in policy, and they're just speechless. And they're like, "What kind of world do you live in?" I mean, and I'm like, "In this,
this is reality.
It's reality.
This happens a lot, a lot." Well, I think it's time to come to a close here. Gong, you've been fantastic. I want to thank everybody who came to participate in the chat. I want to thank Mashable for letting us have the chat here on their site. I want to thank Samana Mason for letting us hold this in their their place of business. We do this every week. Come back and visit us. DesignChat.info. Follow me on Twitter. I'm at Hubajub and at DesignChat. And, of course, follow Gong. He's amazing. He's at Adam Iota. And we're putting all these links in there. Anybody who's still here, put your Twitter link in the chat room so everybody can follow everybody and keep this communication going. We use the hashtag DesignChat all the time. So connect with the group through either design or DesignChat. I'm all for anybody connecting and talking about design on the web. So thank you again, Gong, for hanging out with us tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity, Ryan. This is awesome. Thank you.
And so we're capturing the video. The video will live on Mevio, designchat.mevio.com, and you can download this as a free podcast on iTunes. So check us out. And, oh, yeah, Facebook group. I always forget that one. We've got a Facebook group. We keep on adding people to it. Come check us out on Facebook and keep the conversation going there, too. So have a good night, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.